The morning Dr. Elena Vasquez discovered that humanity was not alone in the universe started like any other Tuesday at the Arecibo Deep Space Monitoring Station. Coffee machines hummed their familiar tune while banks of computers processed endless streams of cosmic data. Elena had worked at the facility for 8 years, and in all that time, the most exciting discovery had been a new pulsar that turned out to be already cataloged by a team in Australia. She settled into her workstation with a steaming mug and pulled up the overnight scan results from Sector 7 Alpha. The computer had flagged several anomalies during the night shift, which usually meant equipment glitches or interference from passing satellites. Elena began her routine of eliminating false positives, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she filtered out known sources of noise. The third anomaly made her pause. The signal pattern was unlike anything in their database. It wasn't the random static of cosmic background radiation, nor was it the regular pulse of a stellar object. Instead, it showed a complex, organized structure that repeated every 47 minutes with mathematical precision. Elena leaned closer to her monitor, adjusting the frequency filters. The signal became clearer, revealing intricate patterns within patterns. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and what appeared to be geometric formulas were embedded in the transmission. Her heart began to race as she realized what she might be looking at. "Hey, Marcus," she called to her colleague at the next station. "Come look at this." Dr. Marcus Chen rolled his chair over, his expression skeptical until he saw the data on Elena's screen. His eyes widened as he recognized the implications. "That's not natural," he whispered. "That's artificial. That's intelligence." Within hours, the Arecibo facility buzzed with activity. Dr. Sarah Williams, the station director, had called in specialists from around the world. Cryptographers, mathematicians, linguists, and xenobiology experts filled the usually quiet halls. Everyone wanted to be part of what could be the most significant discovery in human history. The signal originated from a point roughly 12 light-years away, in the direction of the Vega system. As teams worked around the clock to decode the transmission, more monitoring stations across Earth began picking up similar signals. The Parkes Observatory in Australia, the Very Large Array in New Mexico, and the FAST telescope in China all reported identical patterns coming from the same coordinates. Dr. James Morrison, a specialist in theoretical xenocommunication from MIT, led the decoding efforts. His team had been working for 3 days straight when they achieved their first breakthrough. The mathematical sequences weren't just random patterns, they were instructions, blueprints. The alien transmission was teaching humanity how to build something. "It's a communication device," Morrison announced to the gathered scientists. "They're sending us the plans to build our own interstellar transmitter. They want us to talk back." The revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community and, inevitably, to government officials worldwide. Within 48 hours of Morrison's announcement, representatives from every major space agency sat in emergency sessions. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency meeting, while military advisors whispered urgently in the ears of world leaders. Elena found herself thrust into the spotlight as one of the signal's discoverers. She testified before congressional committees, briefed Pentagon officials, and found her face on magazine covers around the world. But amid all the attention, she couldn't shake a growing sense of unease about humanity's response to the discovery. While scientists worked to build the communication device, military leaders had a different focus. General Patricia Hayes from the U.S. Space Command expressed the concern shared by many in defense circles. "We don't know their intentions. For all we know, this could be a trap. We need to be prepared for any possibility." Defense contractors around the world suddenly found themselves with unlimited budgets for space-based weapons systems. The Orbital Defense Initiative, a program that had been shelved for decades due to cost concerns, was suddenly fast-tracked with congressional approval. Massive railguns capable of firing projectiles at significant fractions of light speed were designed and approved for construction in Earth's orbit. Elena watched this militaristic response with growing alarm. She had hoped that first contact would unite humanity around scientific discovery and peaceful communication. Instead, world leaders seemed more interested in preparing for war with beings they had never even spoken to. The alien communication device was completed 6 months after the first signal's detection. Built in a secure facility beneath NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex, it incorporated technologies that pushed human engineering to its limits. The device used principles of quantum entanglement and exotic matter manipulation that human science barely understood. Dr. Morrison's team spent weeks preparing humanity's first response message. They crafted a careful greeting that included mathematical proofs to demonstrate human intelligence, peaceful intentions expressed through universal concepts, and basic information about Earth and its inhabitants. Elena was part of the committee that approved the final message. The transmission was sent on a cold morning in December, almost exactly 1 year after Elena's initial discovery. Scientists around the world held their breath as the message traveled through space. Carried by technologies they had learned from the very beings they were trying to contact. The response came faster than expected. While the physics of the quantum communication system weren't fully understood by human scientists, it became clear that the aliens had been monitoring Earth's transmissions from the moment the device was activated. Their reply arrived just 6 hours after humanity's greeting was sent. Elena was in the control room when the alien response was received. The message was far more complex than their initial transmission, filled with detailed information about their civilization, their history, and their purpose for contacting Earth. As the translation algorithms worked to decode the communication, a picture emerged that changed everything. The beings called themselves the Architects, and they were not from the Vega system. They were not from any single star system at all. The Architects were an ancient species that had transcended physical existence millions of years ago, becoming beings of pure energy that traveled between galaxies. They had been observing the development of intelligent life throughout the cosmos for eons, and Earth had caught their attention. But the Architects were not alone in the universe. The message revealed the existence of other intelligences, some benevolent and some decidedly hostile to emerging civilizations. The galaxy was not the empty void that humans had imagined, but a complex ecosystem of competing species, each with their own agendas and territories. The Architects explained that they had contacted Earth as a warning. A species they called the Harvesters was moving through this section of the galaxy, systematically destroying or enslaving any civilization they encountered. The Harvesters viewed emerging species like humanity as either resources to be exploited or threats to be eliminated before they could become truly dangerous. According to the Architect's message, the Harvesters had detected Earth's radio transmissions decades ago and were already on their way. Their fleet would arrive in the Sol system within 18 months. The Architects had provided humanity with the communication technology in hopes that an advanced warning might allow Earth to prepare a defense. The alien message included detailed information about Harvester technology, tactics, and previous conquests. They were a machine intelligence that had long ago consumed their biological creators, existing now as a collective consciousness spread across vast fleets of automated warships. They possessed energy weapons that could crack planets and defensive systems that had withstood the attacks of civilizations far more advanced than humanity. Elena stared at the translated message on her screen, feeling the weight of the revelation. Humanity was not alone, but their cosmic neighbors were not the peaceful explorers that science fiction had often imagined. The universe was a dangerous place, filled with predators that viewed Earth as nothing more than a convenient source of raw materials and slave labor. The initial hope and wonder of first contact had been replaced by stark terror. World leaders who had been preparing for the possibility of alien contact found themselves facing an existential threat that made their worst-case scenarios seem optimistic. The military preparations that had seemed paranoid and aggressive now appeared woefully inadequate. General Hayes called an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Coalition, a hastily formed alliance of the world's military powers. Elena was invited as one of the few people who understood both the alien technology and the implications of their warning. As she sat in the sterile conference room surrounded by uniformed officers and government officials, she realized that humanity's response to the universe's call would indeed be warships. According to this intelligence, General Hayes addressed the assembled group, we have 18 months before an invasion fleet arrives. 18 months to prepare for a war against an enemy that has been conquering civilizations for thousands of years. The architects have given us a fighting chance by warning us, but that's all it is, a chance. Elena listened as military strategists outlined humanity's options. The Orbital Defense Initiative was expanded beyond its original scope. Every space-capable nation committed their resources to building defensive platforms in Earth's orbit. Mining operations on the Moon and asteroids were militarized to provide raw materials for weapons production. But the most controversial proposal came from Dr. Elizabeth Kane, a theoretical physicist from CERN. She had been studying the architect's technology and believed that humanity could reverse engineer their communication systems to create weapons. If the aliens could send information instantaneously across vast distances, perhaps humans could send something more destructive. The quantum entanglement principles they've shown us could be weaponized, Dr. Kane explained to the somber assembly. We could create missiles that ignore conventional physics, appearing directly at their target without crossing the space between. Or we could build communication systems that allow our forces to coordinate across the entire solar system without light-speed delays. The proposal sparked immediate debate. Elena found herself arguing against the militarization of the architect's gift, believing that humanity should focus on defense and perhaps finding a diplomatic solution. But she was outnumbered by those who saw the approaching threat as justification for any measures necessary to survive. As the meeting broke up and officials rushed to implement humanity's defense plans, Elena remained in her chair, staring at the datapad containing the architect's message. Hidden in the technical specifications and warnings about the harvesters was something else, a subtle hint that the architects themselves were not as neutral as they claimed to be. The warning about the harvesters was genuine, but Elena suspected there was more to the story. The architects had their own agenda for contacting Earth, and humanity's survival was only part of their plan. As she watched the world's most powerful nations prepare for interstellar war, Elena wondered if humanity was trading one form of subjugation for another. Outside the conference room windows, she could see construction crews working around the clock on the first orbital defense platform. Massive particle accelerators were being assembled in space, powered by fusion reactors that pushed the limits of human engineering. The sight filled Elena with both pride in humanity's determination and dread at what their species was becoming. The universe had called, and humanity was indeed responding with warships. But as Elena would soon discover, the real test of her species' character would come not in the battles they fought, but in the choices they made about who they wanted to be when the fighting was over. The message from the stars had changed everything, and there was no going back to the innocent world where Earth believed itself alone among the cosmic void. The construction yards orbiting Earth never slept. 16 months after Elena's discovery, the space around humanity's home world bustled with activity that would have been unimaginable just 2 years earlier. Massive industrial complexes hung in the void, their fusion reactors burning like artificial stars as they churned out weapons and defenses that existed only in theoretical papers before the architect's warning. Commander Sarah Mitchell floated through the central hub of Orbital Platform Alpha, the largest of the 12 defensive stations now surrounding Earth. The platform stretched for kilometers in each direction, its hull bristling with railguns, particle beam arrays, and the experimental quantum disruption cannons that Dr. Kane's team had developed from architect technology. Sarah had been a fighter pilot before the crisis began, flying missions over conflict zones that now seemed laughably small in scope. The Global Defense Coalition had promoted her rapidly as they desperately needed officers who could adapt to three-dimensional combat in space. She commanded a force of 3,000 personnel aboard Platform Alpha, but they were just one part of humanity's larger defensive strategy. Through the observation deck's reinforced windows, Sarah could see the massive shipyards where humanity's first true warships were taking shape. The vessels bore no resemblance to anything from Earth's naval tradition. They were designed purely for space combat, their hulls angular and utilitarian, covered in armor plating made from materials that hadn't existed before scientists reverse-engineered architect technologies. The pride of the fleet was the UES Defiance, a battleship nearly 2 kilometers long that incorporated every advancement humanity had achieved during their frantic preparation period. Its main weapon was a spinal-mounted particle cannon that could theoretically punch through a small moon. Its defenses included energy shields adapted from architect designs and armor that could redistribute kinetic energy across its entire hull. Captain James Torres commanded the Defiance, and Sarah had worked closely with him during the final testing phases. Torres was a former submarine commander who had adapted remarkably well to three-dimensional naval warfare. His crew of 800 included personnel from every space-capable nation on Earth, united by the common goal of defending their species. The international cooperation that had emerged during the crisis was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement. Old rivalries and territorial disputes seemed petty when faced with extinction. The Chinese contributed their expertise in manufacturing and logistics. The Russians provided propulsion technology adapted from their nuclear submarine programs. The Americans offered their advanced computer systems and weapons design. The Europeans brought their precision engineering and scientific research capabilities. But it wasn't just the traditional space powers that contributed to humanity's defense. Nations that had never launched a satellite found ways to support the effort. Brazil's agricultural scientists developed hydroponic systems to feed orbital crews. India's software engineers created the artificial intelligence systems that would coordinate the defense fleet. Nigeria's materials scientists contributed to the development of new armor composites. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been appointed as scientific liaison to the Global Defense Coalition, a role that put her at the center of humanity's technological revolution. She split her time between the research facilities on Luna and the orbital platforms, ensuring that scientific discoveries were quickly integrated into defensive systems. The lunar colonies had expanded dramatically during the preparation period. What had started as small research outposts were now industrial cities housed in vast underground complexes. The moon's lower gravity and abundant mineral resources made it ideal for manufacturing the exotic materials needed for advanced weapon systems. Elena often found herself in the deepest levels of Luna Base Prime, where Dr. Kane's team worked on their most classified projects. The quantum weaponry they had developed pushed the boundaries of human understanding, but it was their latest breakthrough that gave Elena the most hope for humanity's chances. "We've cracked their shield technology," Dr. Kane announced during a security briefing attended by the coalition's top leadership. "The harvesters use a form of energy barrier that can deflect or absorb conventional weapons, but we've found a way to phase our weapons through their defenses using quantum tunneling effects." The quantum phase torpedoes that emerged from Dr. Ross Kane's research were humanity's potential ace in the hole. Unlike conventional missiles that could be intercepted or deflected, these weapons existed in a quantum superposition that allowed them to bypass most defensive systems. They would only materialize at their target, making them nearly impossible to defend against. But Elena knew that technology alone wouldn't save humanity. The architects had made it clear that the harvesters were not just technologically superior, they were also utterly ruthless. They had conquered civilizations far more advanced than Earth, enslaving their populations and stripping their worlds of resources before moving on to the next target. The psychological preparation for war had been almost as important as the technological development. Humanity had never faced an enemy that viewed them as nothing more than useful materials. The concept of total warfare against an implacable foe required a fundamental shift in human thinking about conflict. General Patricia Hayes had established training centers across Earth and in the orbital facilities where soldiers learned to fight in zero-gravity and vacuum conditions. The tactics they developed had no precedent in human military history. Space combat required thinking in 3 dimensions, coordinating across vast distances, and making split-second decisions when communication delays could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. The psychological toll of the preparation period had been enormous. Suicide rates spiked in the months following the architect's warning, as people struggled to cope with the knowledge that their world was under threat from forces beyond their control. But humanity's response had ultimately been remarkable. Instead of falling into despair, most people had channeled their fear into determination. Volunteer rates for the defense forces exceeded all expectations. The orbital platforms were staffed by people from every profession imaginable. Former teachers operated communication arrays, retired engineers maintained weapons systems, and displaced factory workers became gunners on humanity's newest warships. Elena often visited the crew quarters aboard the orbital platforms, talking with the people who had left everything behind to defend their species. Their stories reminded her why the defense effort mattered. Maria Santos had been a kindergarten teacher in São Paulo before volunteering for Platform Beta. She now operated one of the most sophisticated sensor arrays ever built, tracking objects across the entire solar system. "My students used to ask if there were monsters in space," Maria told Elena during one of their conversations. "I always told them no, that space was beautiful and peaceful. I guess I was wrong about the monsters, but I was right about it being beautiful, worth fighting for." The preparations had transformed more than just Earth's military capabilities. Humanity's scientific understanding had advanced by decades in just 18 months. The architect technologies had opened new fields of research that scientists were only beginning to explore. Quantum mechanics, exotic matter physics, and energy manipulation techniques that had been purely theoretical became practical applications. The medical advances alone were revolutionary. Dr. Rachel Kim's team at the Seoul Research Institute had developed treatments for previously incurable diseases by studying architect biological data. Regenerative medicine, genetic therapy, and neural enhancement techniques emerged from their research into how the architects had transcended physical existence. But perhaps the most significant change was in humanity's perspective about their place in the universe. The knowledge that Earth was not alone, that intelligence was common but often hostile, had fundamentally altered how humans saw themselves. They were no longer the dominant species on an isolated world, but newcomers in a galaxy filled with ancient civilizations and terrible dangers. The transformation was visible everywhere Elena looked. Earth's cities had changed dramatically as resources were redirected to the defense effort. Massive spaceports had been constructed where forests once stood. The night sky was bright with the lights of orbital construction projects. Children grew up learning about stellar navigation and vacuum suit operations alongside traditional subjects. Yet for all the changes, Elena noticed that humanity had retained its essential character. The diversity that had once divided nations now strengthened the defense effort. Different perspectives and approaches to problem-solving had accelerated innovation beyond what any single culture could have achieved alone. As the 18-month deadline approached, Elena found herself aboard the command ship Vigilance, humanity's mobile headquarters for the coming battle. Admiral Chen Wang, the supreme commander of Earth's defense forces, had been monitoring long-range sensors for any sign of the Harvester fleet. "We've detected gravitational anomalies at the edge of the solar system," Admiral Wang reported during the final strategy briefing. "Our deep space monitoring stations confirm what the architects warned us about. The Harvesters are coming and they're bringing everything they have." The enemy fleet was massive beyond human comprehension. Hundreds of ships ranging from small fighters to planet-killing dreadnoughts were approaching Earth at significant fractions of light speed. Their technology allowed them to bend space-time around their vessels, making precise tracking difficult until they were relatively close. Elena studied the tactical displays showing humanity's defensive positions. 12 orbital platforms surrounded Earth, each one a fortress capable of fighting entire fleets. Beyond them, 3 defensive lines of warships waited in carefully planned formations. The outer line included the newest and most powerful vessels like the Defiance, equipped with humanity's most advanced weapons. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a maze of hidden weapons platforms and automated defense systems. Mining stations had been converted into missile bases, their industrial equipment repurposed to manufacture ammunition during the battle. Even Venus had been prepared as a fallback position, with underground facilities that could shelter Earth's population if the worst occurred. But Elena knew that all their preparations might still not be enough. The Harvesters had conquered civilizations with thousands of years more experience than humanity. They had weapons that could crack planets and defenses that had withstood attacks from species far more advanced than Earth. The key to humanity's strategy lay not just in their technology, but in their unpredictability. The Harvesters had fought countless battles against countless species, but they had never faced anything quite like humanity. Earth's defenders had advantages that no previous victims had possessed: advanced warning, reverse-engineered architect technology, and the desperate determination of a species that refused to go quietly into extinction. Dr. Kane's quantum weapons were completely unknown to the Harvesters. Humanity's psychological warfare techniques, developed from centuries of human conflict, might confuse an enemy that viewed war as a purely logical process. Most importantly, the diversity of human thinking meant that Earth's defenders might find solutions that more homogeneous species could never discover. As the final hours before contact ticked away, Elena made her way to the observation deck of the Vigilance. Earth hung below her, blue and beautiful and fragile, surrounded by the lights of humanity's orbital defenses. In the distance, she could see the bright points of light that marked the approaching enemy fleet. The universe had called, and humanity had indeed responded with warships, but they had also responded with cooperation, innovation, and an unshakable determination to survive. The species that had once fought wars over patches of land and ideological differences had united in the face of an existential threat. Elena thought about the message from the architects that had started everything. They had warned humanity about the Harvesters, but she still suspected they had their own agenda. The advanced beings had chosen Earth for reasons they hadn't fully explained, and their gifts came with obligations that humanity didn't yet understand. But those concerns would have to wait. The immediate future held only the battle to come, and Elena was confident that her species would face it with the same courage and ingenuity they had shown during their frantic preparations. Humanity might be the newest intelligence in a galaxy filled with ancient powers, but they were determined to prove that youth and determination could triumph over age and experience. The countdown to first contact had begun, and Elena could only hope that humanity's response to the universe's call would be enough to ensure their species' survival in the vast and dangerous cosmos they had discovered they inhabited. The first shots of humanity's war for survival came from the outer edge of the solar system, where Captain Maria Rodriguez's scout ship Hermes detected the Harvester Vanguard emerging from quantum jump space near Neptune's orbit. The enemy vessels appeared as tiers in reality itself, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Contact confirmed," Rodriguez reported to Admiral Wang aboard the Vigilance. "Harvester fleet is larger than projected. I count at least 400 vessels, including what appears to be a planetary siege platform." Elena watched the tactical displays from the command center, her heart racing as red symbols representing enemy ships filled the three-dimensional map of the solar system. The Harvester fleet moved with mechanical precision, their formations perfect geometric patterns that spoke of a collective intelligence coordinating hundreds of individual ships. The enemy's approach was methodical and terrifying. They made no attempt at communication, issued no demands for surrender. The Harvesters had come to claim what they saw as rightfully theirs, the resources of the Sol system and the labor potential of its dominant species. Admiral Wang activated the fleet-wide communication system that linked every ship and platform in humanity's defensive network. "All stations. This is Vigilance Actual. The enemy has arrived. Execute Omega Protocol. Earth's children, it's time to show the universe what we're made of." The first engagement began in the asteroid belt, where Commander Sarah Mitchell's platform Alpha Group waited in ambush among the mining stations. The Harvesters approached the belt cautiously, their sensors probing for hidden threats. They had learned from previous conquests to expect desperate defensive measures from cornered species. What they didn't expect was the creativity that humanity brought to warfare. The asteroid mining equipment had been modified into weapons that defied conventional military logic. Massive ore haulers became kinetic projectiles, their cargo holds filled with tungsten rods that turned them into devastating impact weapons. Mining lasers designed to cut through rock were refocused into coherent beam weapons that could slice through enemy hulls. The Harvester scouts entered the belt first, their sleek forms gliding between the asteroids as they searched for threats. They triggered the first trap when their sensors detected what appeared to be an abandoned mining station. As they moved to investigate, hidden charges detonated throughout a cluster of asteroids, creating a deadly cloud of high-velocity debris. "First blood to humanity," Sarah reported as Harvester scout ships were torn apart by the artificial meteor storm. But she knew the real test was yet to come. The main enemy fleet was still approaching, and their initial losses would only make them more cautious and deadly. The Harvesters adapted quickly, as the architects had warned they would. Their formation shifted to account for the new threat, and they began systematically destroying every asteroid in their path. Energy beams lanced out from their ships, vaporizing rock and metal with casual efficiency. But humanity had learned to adapt as well. Hidden throughout the belt were Dr. Kane's quantum phase torpedoes, weapons that existed in superposition until the moment of impact. As the Harvesters methodically cleared their path, the torpedoes activated, materializing inside enemy hulls without warning. The first Harvester dreadnought to fall sent shockwaves through both fleets. The massive vessel, larger than any human ship, simply imploded as a quantum torpedo materialized in its reactor core. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt like a new star, and for a moment, even the relentless Harvester advance paused. Elena monitored the battle from multiple perspectives, watching through sensors scattered across the solar system. The Harvester fleet was reorganizing, their tactical algorithms adjusting to account for weapons that shouldn't exist. But humanity's surprises were just beginning. Captain Torres brought the Defiance into the battle as the Harvesters cleared the asteroid belt. The massive battleship emerged from behind Ceres, its spinal cannon already charging for its first shot. The particle beam that erupted from the ship's bow carried the energy output of a small star, focused into a coherent stream that could penetrate any known armor. The beam struck a Harvester cruiser dead center, and for a moment it seemed like the enemy vessel might survive the impact. Its shields flared, and its armor held. Then the secondary effect kicked in. The exotic particles Dr. Kane's team had embedded in the beam began to cascade through the enemy's systems, turning their own technology against them. The Harvester ship came apart from within, its hull buckling as its own power systems overloaded. But the enemy's response was swift and devastating. A dozen ships focused their fire on the Defiance, energy beams and kinetic projectiles converging on Torres's position. "Shields holding at 60%, Torres reported as his ship shook under the bombardment. "But I can't take much more of this. Initiating evasive pattern delta." The Defiance began a complex dance through three-dimensional space, its engines burning at maximum output as it dodged between enemy fire. Human ships had one advantage over Harvester vessels. Their crews could think creatively about movement and tactics in ways that artificial intelligence struggled to predict. As the battle intensified, Elena noticed something that gave her hope. The Harvesters were fighting exactly as the architects had described, with overwhelming technological superiority but limited tactical flexibility. They expected their enemies to respond in logical, predictable ways, and humanity's chaotic creativity was confusing their battle algorithms. The real turning point came when Dr. Rachel Kim's medical research paid an unexpected dividend. Her team's studies of Harvester physiology, based on data provided by the architects, had revealed a critical weakness in their collective consciousness. The machine intelligence that controlled their fleet relied on quantum-entangled communication networks that could be disrupted. "Initiating cognitive warfare protocol," Elena announced as she activated the weapon systems that Dr. Kim's team had developed. Across the human fleet, specialized transmitters began broadcasting signals designed to interfere with Harvester group consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. Harvester ships that had moved in perfect coordination suddenly began making erratic maneuvers. Their formation broke apart as individual vessels lost contact with the collective mind that had been directing their actions. Admiral Wong seized the opportunity. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel. Take out their leadership node and the whole fleet becomes much less dangerous." The Harvester command ship was a massive construct at the center of their formation, easily 10 times the size of humanity's largest vessel. Its defenses were formidable, protected by energy shields and armor that had withstood attacks from dozens of conquered civilizations. But it had never faced weapons that could phase through conventional defenses. Quantum phase torpedoes materialized throughout the command ship's hull, their detonations cascading through critical systems. At the same time, the cognitive warfare systems intensified their assault on the ship's artificial consciousness, creating feedback loops that threatened to crash the entire enemy network. Elena watched in amazement as the seemingly invincible Harvester fleet began to fall apart. Ships collided with each other as their navigation systems failed. Weapons fired randomly into space as targeting computers lost their connection to central command. The mechanical precision that had made them so deadly became a liability when their coordination networks collapsed. But the Harvesters weren't finished yet. As their collective consciousness fragmented, individual ships began operating on autonomous protocols that made them even more dangerous in some ways. Without central coordination, they became unpredictable, lashing out at targets with desperate fury. The battle spread throughout the inner solar system as damaged Harvester ships fled toward Earth, pursued by human forces. Some enemy vessels managed to break through the outer defensive lines, their weapons scarred but still functional. They would have to be stopped before they could reach humanity's home world. Platform Alpha engaged a wounded Harvester battlecruiser as it approached Earth's orbital space. The enemy ship was massive and heavily armed, but its shields were failing and its hull showed the scars of multiple torpedo impacts. Sarah knew this might be humanity's last stand. "All batteries, concentrate fire on their main reactor section," she ordered as her platform's weapons opened up on the approaching enemy. Railguns hurled projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, while particle beams carved through space with deadly precision. The Harvester ship returned fire, its weapon system still functional despite the damage it had sustained. Energy beams swept across Platform Alpha's hull, testing the limits of humanity's defensive technology. The battle became a slugging match between two massive opponents, each trying to outlast the other's defenses. Elena coordinated with Dr. Kane's team to deploy their final surprise, a quantum disruption field that could destabilize the exotic matter that powered Harvester technology. The field generators had been hidden throughout Earth's orbital space, disguised as communication satellites and sensor arrays. As the field activated, the wounded Harvester ship began to come apart at the molecular level. Its hull started to dissolve as the forces that held its advanced materials together were disrupted. The enemy vessel's death throes lit up Earth's sky like a second sun before it finally collapsed into rapidly expanding plasma. The destruction of the Harvester battlecruiser marked the end of organized enemy resistance in Earth's vicinity, but the war was far from over. Scattered enemy ships continued to fight throughout the solar system, their autonomous protocols driving them to continue the battle even without central coordination. It took 3 more days to hunt down the last Harvester vessels hiding in the asteroid belt and the outer planet's moon systems. Each one fought with desperate fury, their weapons still deadly even when their ships were crippled. But humanity's forces had gained confidence and experience with each victory, learning to exploit the weaknesses in enemy technology and tactics. The final enemy ship was destroyed near Pluto's orbit by a combined force led by Captain Torres aboard the battered but victorious Defiance. As the last Harvester vessel exploded in the cold darkness at the edge of the solar system, humanity realized they had achieved the impossible. They had defeated a force that had conquered civilizations far older and more advanced than Earth. Elena stood in the observation deck of the Vigilance, looking out at Earth's orbital space, where the debris of the great battle still drifted among the stars. Humanity's losses had been heavy. Nearly half their fleet was destroyed or damaged beyond repair, and thousands of brave defenders had given their lives for their species' survival. But they had won. Against all odds, humanity had faced the universe's call and responded with such determination and creativity that they had turned certain defeat into ultimate victory. The Harvesters, who had seemed invincible just days before, were nothing but expanding clouds of plasma drifting through the void. Admiral Wang's voice echoed through the fleet as he addressed humanity's defenders. Today, we proved that our species belongs among the stars. We faced an enemy that had conquered 1,000 worlds, and we sent them into the darkness. Earth's children have earned their place in the galaxy. The victory celebration was tempered by the knowledge that the universe remained a dangerous place. The Harvesters had been just one threat among many, and humanity would need to remain vigilant if they wanted to survive in their new cosmic environment. But they had proven something important, that youth and determination could triumph over age and experience, that diversity could overcome uniformity, and that the human spirit was truly indomitable. Elena received a priority communication from the Deep Space Monitoring Station where her journey had begun almost 2 years earlier. Dr. Morrison's team had detected new signals from the direction of the galactic core, not the measured transmissions of the architects, but something else entirely. "It's a message," Morrison reported, his voice filled with excitement and apprehension, "from something calling itself the Galactic Council. They want to meet with Earth's representatives. It seems our victory over the Harvesters has attracted attention from across the galaxy." As Elena contemplated this new development, she realized that humanity's war for survival had been just the beginning. They had answered the universe's call with warships and emerged victorious, but now they faced an even greater challenge, taking their place as equals among the galaxy's ancient civilizations. The young species from Earth had proven they could fight for their freedom. Now they would need to learn how to use that freedom wisely. The universe was vast and full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination, but humanity was no longer alone in facing them. They had earned their spot among the stars through courage and sacrifice, and Elena was confident that whatever challenges lay ahead, her species would meet them with the same determination they had shown against the Harvesters. The universe had called, humanity had responded with warships, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Looking out at the stars that no longer seemed cold and empty, Elena smiled. Earth's children were ready for whatever came next. Armed with technology beyond their wildest dreams and the unbreakable spirit that had carried them from caves to the conquest of interstellar space. The universe had called, and humanity had answered with everything they had. Now it was time to see what else the cosmos had to offer.